Okay, we should be live momentarily.
Okay.
Oh, we're live. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It is Angie Atkinson, and I'm here with the lovely and talented Dana Morningstar. Dana, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me.
Always happy to have you. And for those of you who are new around here, we do this every Tuesday, either on this channel or over on Dana's channel, Thrive After Abuse, right here on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to both of us, and we will be really excited to see you in the chat. So while we're waiting for everybody to pop in, Dana and I were talking before we went live about, first of all, let me apologize for being late, everybody. We had a little technical difficulty, but luckily we figured it out. Hello, everybody. So what we wanted to talk about is that there are various studies out there that talk about narcissists and how they kind of have criminal behaviors. And we've talked before about the dark triad, and Dana mentioned, as we were discussing before, something about the 7 deadly sins being the basis for all of that. Dana, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think, narcissists, people that are at this level where they're so self-oriented, I really view it as a degree of, it's such a degree of dysfunction that if you were to look kind of like at Maslow's pyramid, the basic needs, that's where they're operating from. There is no there's no insight, there is no taking others into consideration. It's this very basic wants and needs that they're driven by. And I mean, so yes, it's basically, the lust, greed, envy, jealousy, these kinds of things. And so this is why you see it in crimes, or when you're on the receiving end of it. It's just all about them all of the time. They're very impulsive. They live in the moment. They're not future. Most of them, the vast majority of them, really are not future oriented. Very immature.
Absolutely. And this stream, or the idea for this particular stream was sort of inspired by an article that I read on Forbes, Forbes.com. And the reason that I selected it, Dana and I are both kind of into those true crime type stories, and I think a lot of people are. And it, for me, and I think also maybe for you, Dana, it's about kind of understanding the psychology of it. Like, how could somebody be that way? And is that a similar thing for you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. And you might be this way too, Angie. Like, even though we're in this every single day and we're working with other survivors and we've experienced this, it can be so helpful to just continue educating ourselves about the wide variety of experiences that people have. And a lot of these true crime shows, it's just jaw-dropping. It's stuff that you would never, it's just a continual new low.
Yeah.
That you just think, well, surely, even though we both know, like, evil has no rules, like there is no limit to this behavior. It's all about what they want in the moment by any means necessary. And so, yeah, seeing these shows, it's just, even though you know that, you're like, wow, oh my God, like that's wild. How could somebody do that? And so it, for me, anyhow, it kind of helps me to stay on my toes. And it just, sometimes I just need to continue to get it hammered home of, really, like there is no bottom,
right,
to their behavior.
Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. And I think one of the things in the Forbes article, that several things in the Forbes article stood out to me, but one of the things that really I think we can all kind of relate to when it comes to dealing with narcissists, they say that, of course, we know narcissism causes feelings of entitlement, which means, of course, that they think the rules don't apply to them. And in this particular article, they were talking about white collar crime specifically, but noted that the narcissists, a lot of times they feel wronged by other people because of that sense of entitlement. And so sometimes they actually believe that they are, righting a wrong by committing a crime in some cases, and I think that gets, when we're talking about white collar crime, that's an issue. And of course, the other issue being that they think they're smarter or sneakier or better than most people, and, or at least the general population. And I think, because of that, they think they won't be caught, which I found that interesting, because I know that in my own life, with the narcissists I have dealt with, it's a similar kind of, they they assume I won't know. And I'm not trying to like brag or anything, but I'm really smart and I understand people. So when they try to pull the wool over my eyes, it almost offends me that they would, but I realize that they're limited and that's why they have to underestimate people. But, but a lot of these other qualities, the narcissistic personality was the last thing listed, right? But then they talked about being charming, we all know, right? And they talked about convenience, which is kind of iffy on the narcissism scale, right? But getting off on high risk behaviors. I mean, that's another thing that they talk about. And I thought, that's specifically, I think, another thing. It's not necessarily a narcissistic behavior, but you do see that in many narcissists. They love the high risk thing. And I think it's maybe related to the whole brain chemistry factor that they're not making enough dopamine or adrenaline or whatever's going on there. But what are your thoughts on that? Anything?
Yeah, I agree completely. I do tend to think it's more like a brain thing. And, if a person, if they, they don't experience, guilt, grief, or remorse, then it's that continual challenge of like, well, and that arrogance to think, oh, I could continue to get away with stuff like this, then they're going to continue upping the bar. I think partly just greed, but it's like you're saying, it's that greed and it's that arrogance. And that tends to lead to their downfall because most other people, especially intelligent people, are like, what were you thinking? Like, of course you weren't going to get away with this. Like, this is ridiculous. And again, a lot of these true crime shows, you watch these and you're like, really, dude? Like, you really just threw your whole life away. You really thought nobody in this day and age with DNA and cameras and like everything else, that nobody was going to catch you?
Right.
It's outrageous. And especially when the narcissists or the murderers on the show are intelligent people, like if they're doctors or lawyers or, CEOs, like people that you would think would have some foresight. And it's like completely lacking. It's just wild. But like you said, for them, they have to, for any of us, we have to, I would say everybody except for psychopaths maybe would be the exception to this, but we all have to take action in what we think is right. And
right.
so if we're doing something that we know is wrong, because of that cognitive dissonance, and narcissists have it too, we have to justify to ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. And these justifications, that's when you start seeing everything getting tangled up in all of their nonsensical behavior, because they're doing all these mental gymnastics to continue to justify to themselves why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
But
exactly.
To a mature person who is not at that level where they're just trying to get their immediate wants and needs met, you can see it for the immaturity and the ridiculousness that it is. Because it's sort of like a little kid trying to pull one over on you and lying to you and giving you all these excuses of, well, I know you told me to not eat the cookies, but really, I mean, you left them out.
Right.
Or like,
it really is.
Yeah, it is. Or like, well, I only ate one. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Or, well, if you didn't want me to eat them, you shouldn't have made them.
Right.
Or they just flat out lie to you, right? And they're like, I didn't eat any cookies.
While they're wiping the crumbs off their chin.
Yeah, they got chocolate all over their face.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of stuff. And it's whatever they want reality to be, they just use words to try to shape their reality. But again, those of us that are not sharing their reality because only they are privy to it, you can see the nonsense for what it is as it unfolds.
So true. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, well, really quick, and then we'll jump in the chat. When we talked a few weeks ago about the Fire Festival, I mean, and you think about that guy, I actually went back and watched at least part of both of those documentaries, and I'm with you. I think you were right. I think he is, I mean, one of the I can't remember which was which. One of them seemed like they were trying to make him seem like just a nice guy who messed up. And I'm guessing that's the one that he paid for or whatever happened, or they paid him or whatever. I don't know. But the other one was pretty clear on what he was. I don't know. I guess it was kind of interesting because I think that a lot of the things we're talking about here kind of apply to, what was his name? Billy, Billy
it's McFarlane.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So he was definitely I think you were on spot. I mean, not that we diagnose anybody, but I think you were spot on with that. Um,
Well, it's definitely sociopathic behavior,
oh my
right?
gosh.
And
Yeah.
he fits the profile. I mean, he's charming. He knows how to schmooze people. He enjoys this. And in that one documentary, I forget which Hulu or Netflix. Uh, up until the very end, and then you realize this guy knows all of this is being recorded. And
Yeah.
right after Fire Festival, did not miss a beat, jumped right into that other scam where he began emailing these people trying to sell tickets that didn't even exist. So like
Crazy.
any doubt that
Yeah.
anybody had in their mind of, oh, this was just a young entrepreneur who got in over his head, that erases it.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
the people in the documentary were spot on. They're like, this is not the last time we've heard or seen from this guy. And they're right, because people like him, they don't stop.
Right. And he was even, I remember they were saying that as they were getting up to the point where they were, I guess, going to try to do the thing, they were talking about they were going to sell tickets, where they were going and buying sports tickets or something. And I think it's basically scalping. I think that what they were doing, they were purchasing tickets in order to sell tickets or something. Did you see that? Like,
are you talking like the fraud after Fire?
maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I saw it. One of the things, and I should probably have written some notes down, but I saw one of the things where they were talking about, I feel like it was actually funding, and maybe they were just explaining to us who this person really is, but they were using this to fund it because they kept going broke. And so they were going and buying batches of tickets and selling them above cost in order to make extra money. And this is how they were. I mean, the whole thing is very shady to me, but anyway.
Yeah. But that's what they do. And the unfortunate thing is these white collar crimes, for a wide variety of reasons, these people tend to do significantly less jail time. And what's so frustrating is then they tend to get back out and they are right back at it again. And it's sort of like this good old boys network where, people at like the 1%, the 1%ers in society, they just get away with it. They have connections. And so if they do time, it's at a really cushy type place. And, they have full privileges and this, that, and the other. So that kind of stuff it's just really frustrating.
For sure. Yeah, I could not agree more. Okay, so I thought we would jump in the chat. I want to say hello to everybody, but I don't want to waste too much of y'all's time. So let me just say hello to everybody. And let's jump in here. So we have, let's see.
Oh, here's something, a comment.
Oh, yeah,
this
go ahead.
Is Life After Gray says, he put the whole business in my name because he was on disability and then scammed people and had credit cards all in my name. And there were over $300,000 in PayPal chargebacks.
300? Did you say 300,000?
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's horrible. Oh
yeah.
my God.
I mean, any chargebacks.
Well, yeah,
but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They just don't care. There was a true crime story that I saw. It was about a sport. I think the guy was a football player. He grew up in a really abusive home. His mother, actually this neighbor lady who raised foster kids, this amazing family, took him in and loved him like their own and helped him get through college and everything else. Then he made it big as a sports star, making millions a year. Well, things began to turn. He convinced his own his mother, the woman that raised him, to put up her own house to help him start this business venture that was never even real. And she lost everything, including her house.
Oh my God, that's
like the empathy, the lack of empathy, the lack of remorse, and it was zero. I mean, and to hear him talk about it, or her talk about it, it was just heartbreaking because she's like, I gave this kid everything and he destroyed me.
God, that's
in
awful.
return. And that's what these people do. Like, you can't earn their dignity, their respect, or being well treated. Like they don't care. Like they don't care. It's not like if we could just strip away all of this problematic behavior that there's somehow like this good person underneath all of that. Like, this is who they are. Until if they ever down the road decide to develop introspection and start healing, that's another thing. But like they generally don't.
Right. they have to think there's something wrong with them in order to actually try to fix something, you know?
Yep.
And yeah. And Angela Falsetta, hello, number one. She says narcissists have all the 7 deadly sins, everyone. And I can't disagree with that.
Yep.
I cannot disagree. Yeah. And then Agatha or Agata? Tell me how you say it.
Agatha.
Agatha. Okay. Yeah. She says, oh, never mind. I thought that was something else. Sorry. Hi, Agatha. Anyway, yeah. So it's such an overwhelming situation when you think about it. Now, Doreen says that her narcissist has engaged in criminal behavior with her, and she didn't elaborate right there, but I'll tell you something. That probably is the case more often than we would even acknowledge ourselves, you know, because obviously, well, in the UK, I guess emotional abuse is now illegal, thank goodness, not over here though. But emotional abuse should be criminal. Physical abuse is criminal. Other types of things that narcissists do in intimate relationships are criminal. And then there's the physical abuse of, you know, and emotional abuse and neglect of childhood when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent. So, I mean, certainly, but I think in the grand scheme of things, like a couple people have said here, Becky said they don't get caught. They keep going until they get caught, and many of them don't get caught. And that's the worst part of it, I think. Now, like E-Rock says, I recently had to deal with a narcissist who knew how to manipulate the law and got me arrested. And I don't know if you know Tracy Malone. She's got, yeah, I did a video with her a long time ago, and she talked about her story of she literally got arrested by her now ex, you know, not by him, but because of him. He called and lied about her, and they literally arrested her. So it's just, yeah. Oh, and then E-Rock went on to say, I have this monster on video, assuming the narcissist, shouting slurs and obscenities at me, essentially rage based on a narcissistic injury from me. Yeah, and that right there is definitely common. Unfortunately, it's awful, but it's common.
Yeah. So. And, you know, I wanted to bring something up real quick too about, you know, you're saying that in the UK, emotional abuse is now considered a crime, which is fantastic. However, I would caution those in the UK and in the US, once that law makes its way over here, it's gonna, you know, manipulators manipulate, and they use every single possible tool in their toolkit. And so a lot of them, some of them are just completely immature and delusional, and they have their own reality. Some of them are fairly emotionally aware and intentional and malicious in their actions. Either way, you lose. Yeah. And with this law, I could totally see an abuser, you know, cherry picking your behavior or pushing you to where you explode, then recording it, then keeping it in text messages or emails or phone or whatever, and then going to court saying that you're the abuser. Right. So I just can't stress this point enough. They do this all the time. We see it here in the US with like texts and videos and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
You're with a manipulator. It's really important that, like, everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing, truly treat it like you'd have to defend it in court.
Yeah, that's so.
And you really want to make it a slam dunk case where it's not this he said, she said, well, he was abusive and then I was reactively abusive and then he was abusive. Like, that's really hard for an outside person to be able to sort through and determine who's the problem, basically. Yeah. So right. Just know that.
And on that same note, I have seen many clients and just people here on YouTube, part of this family, whatever, who have come and said to me, so this person riled me all up, got me all upset, was really abusive and mean to me, and then I reacted and they recorded it. And people have lost their children over this. And this is why Gray Rock is so important when you're dealing with these people, why it's so important for, you know, as soon as you figure this out, to stop reacting to them. Because reactive abuse, look, I understand. I want to scream and yell at people sometimes, and especially when I was going through that, I wanted to scream back, and I did sometimes, not going to lie. But when, you know, when they're that malicious, where they will intentionally get you all, you know, riled up and upset, and then the minute you start going off, they record it, now suddenly they're all calm. You know, that's a red flag. Watch out. beware. And it was said really, really insightful for you to bring that up, Dana. Thank you. That's a really important note. And you're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it happens, right? I mean,
and I think it'll start happening more once they realize that they can get you thrown in jail and, you know, have a paper trail of that you're the problem, not them. There was a gal that I worked with. This was many years ago. She was also arrested by the abuser in her life, and it was wild. I'll kind of try to keep details vague, but long story short, he upped and left her out of the clear blue. They'd been together for like 5-10 years. Mm-hmm. Everything was fine. And then, so she's trying to heal from, oh no, he threw her out. That's what it was. And just ended things. Well, he had already had another honey on the side. She's just devastated from this, was not expecting this at all. There, nothing had led up to this. It was just out of the blue. Well, then she was texting him because she still had a lot of stuff there. And he had said, well, you know what? Yeah, come on over. I'm actually, come on over. I'll give it to you. So then she gets there and he's like, oh, texts her. She texts him, hey, where are you? I'm here to get my stuff. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot. I'm not there. But you know what? The window in the guest room is unlocked. God. Go ahead and just go in. And I'm so sorry, blah, blah. So she does. And then, and this might have been before like police were really checking phone records. But anyways, she goes in and then he calls the police on her for breaking and entering. Oh my God. And yeah. So it was a complete setup. So that's the thing. Like you really want to have another witness to your experience, if at all possible, at all times.
Yep.
You're not dealing with a person that's emotionally mature or sharing the same reality as you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is interesting. On the similar note, first of all, hello, Jillian. Jillian is our well, not ours, but I consider her mine a little bit, but she's a fellow survivor who's also an attorney. She's done some work with me before for free stuff where we've shared with the survivors. Anyway, but she just said, this is a really important topic. And so, hi, Jillian. Patty Sinclair said something that I found very interesting because we talked about the adrenaline issue and the lack of dopamine and stuff. And I don't mean to like pivot away from what you were saying, but this really, she says, when my narcissist feels out of control in normal life, he jumps on his motorcycle and will drive 130 miles an hour. He believes he can always outrun the law. Unfortunately, he gets away with everything. And I think bringing that back around, to this is an example. And I think, coming back to what you were saying, when somebody does something that outrageous, I mean, to be that strategic, I think that's almost psychopath or sociopath. Right. Yeah. But in the case of your standard, lack of empathy narcissist or your standard toxic person, what Patty's dealing with here, I think is clearly someone who has I know I'm pivoting, I'm sorry, but I've seen this a lot. Even with my ex-husband, he was bored easily and quickly, and you had to always entertain him, or he would just do some crazy stuff, like just go out and steal all of our money and be gone all night. I would have no idea where he was, and so what Patty's talking about here, I think it really all kind of ties together, doesn't it? I mean, that he's obviously doing that because he has that lack of dopamine going on, or the brain chemistry is messed up, right? And they've done research and they found out that this is irrelevant to this, but that in narcissists, we know that the part of the brain that deals with empathy is typically thinner than, at least according to research of dead people. You can't really check on people who are alive, I guess, but they've determined that that part of the brain that deals with empathy is thinner on narcissists. And I think that based on the fact that many narcissists also came through a traumatic experience as children, which is where this all usually starts, not all, but many, it's totally feasible that they might not have the ability to create, their body might not have the ability to naturally make dopamine where they feel happy and relaxed. So they need to feel that adrenaline rush in order to fall back down into the dopamine slide, or whatever you want to call it. Would you agree with that? I mean,
yeah, I mean, as far as like brain, things go, they might very well naturally be low on like certain mood regulating chemicals. Right. However, that doesn't explain the need for control.
True.
and in the maliciousness behind it. So like lots of people struggle with not making enough dopamine. You know, you have antidepressants.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, us as survivors, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's not an excuse or an explanation.
Yeah, no, it's not by any stretch. But like that's the piece that brain science can't answer, is the need for control. So you have certain, like, for example, with schizophrenia, it's been shown that schizophrenia and too much dopamine tend to go hand in hand. And so there's different medications that regulate this stuff.
It's interesting.
So there is, you know, a chemical component to a lot of like mental illness and that kind of behavior, but that it's the control issue. And that's what makes this more of like a personality disorder than a mental illness. There's lots of mental illness out there that really can be regulated with medications, but there's not that, unless they're like obsessive compulsive.
Right.
You know? Like medication doesn't help with that control. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see kind of what like neuroscience comes out with in like the next handful of years.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, have you ever experienced seeing a narcissist like intoxicated or drunk or on drugs or anything? I have seen this in person, unfortunately. And what I noticed was that the most intense narcissists, when they would become intoxicated, their egos would leave, and then they would suddenly almost be human briefly during that period of intoxication only. Then they would instantly go back. I got sucked back in so many times by a drunk person or a person that apparently was on a drug I wasn't aware of, but you would see literally their face would change. Did you ever see that, or was it just my horrible experience?
Well, I guess, were they normally like happy drunks?
No, like in some cases, like in one case, there was a cocaine thing that happened. And I don't do that. I would not do that. But this person did that. And I didn't know it at the time. Suddenly they were just a different person. I found out later that there was a cocaine thing, that they had done that. But they weren't like hyper and hopped up, which I understand that's typically what happens. I don't really know. I haven't done that very much, but I mean, at all lately, ever. Anyway, I tried it in college. Okay. But it didn't do anything for me. But anyway, but what I've seen is people typically are crazy on it. So this person wasn't. This person was like quiet and like focused and like calm and almost nice, but certainly not crazy. And I thought, is this like, do they have ADHD or something, or do they have something else going on? But this doesn't explain the lack of empathy and the horrible meanness this person would exhibit. So it's just, I don't really know if that's a thing or not, but I've often seen, even with drinking, where regardless of how they were, but sometimes they would drink and they would become increased, they would just, their ego would go away, and the ego seemed to be the thing driving this person and their control issue. Not that I'm saying that's any sort of diagnosis. This is just some personal observation. I wonder in the chat if you guys have seen anything like that. Sorry, we can just move on. But I do want to say this is a little off topic. Doreen says her ex is currently cooking up a text harassment case against her. After baiting her was unsuccessful, he changed to moving texts around and deleting timestamps. But I just want to say to you, Doreen, go to your provider and tell them you can get a transcript of text. I had a client that had a similar situation, and she went, I think her provider was Verizon, and she went to them, and they actually were able to. And I think I don't think she needed to get any court thing, but it is admissible in court if it's done the right way. And if if he's texting you, you've got to have some kind of a copy of that as well. So if he moves around timestamps and changes things, this will absolutely affect him negatively, not you. So do your research. Dana, do you have any thoughts for Doreen about that?
I agree with everything you're saying.
Okay.
And just real quick, back to like the brain. You got me thinking about this. I don't think I've ever seen their ego leave. I think what I have seen though with people like, that are incredibly narcissistic when they get drunk is that some of their walls tend to come down and they show emotion that they might not have shown before.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've seen that too. Yep.
So that could be it. But what you were saying about ADHD and these kinds of things, For certain mental illness and for certain personality disorders, especially antisocial, some of these things like ADD, ADHD, reactive attachment disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, these things are normally present in childhood.
Yeah.
And so there's certain factors that start showing themselves fairly young. And most clinicians are going to not make a diagnosis because it's kind of hard to tell, is this something that they're going to grow out of? I mean, not the attachment disorder, that has to be like how much, intervention wise can be done in order to get this child more back on track.
Yeah.
But a lot of this stuff, somebody in the chat, Angela, had mentioned that severe depression, suicidal, homicidal attempts, she was feeling like a lot of this falls through the cracks and is misdiagnosed. And she was saying that she's a retired psych nurse. And I would agree, this is the stuff that I've seen too, time and time and time again. And it makes you wonder, like, with these diagnoses, like how often is this stuff confused for PTSD, especially in kids? When you have ADD that's being diagnosed and these kids are just off the wall and they're incredibly behavioral and they're, erratic and they can't focus. Like, I would imagine that a lot of that's trauma. So it's interesting. And yeah.
I totally, I'm with you. And I think it's actually interesting because I did a video a long time ago. I did some research into this because I was diagnosed with ADHD at 35 years old. And my mother growing up, she kept taking me to the doctor and telling them that there was something wrong with me. And I think she diagnosed me actually. She told the doctor that another doctor said I was bipolar. I was not. I've never been bipolar, but she just wanted to put me on medicine to calm me down. So I not calm, whatever she was trying to, I felt like she was trying to numb me out, but to get me to comply maybe with whatever she wanted. And I think that was really wrong. And I wonder if it messed with my head, but also back on the other side of that, ADHD is connected. You're right, to CPTSD, or it could be connected. And I did a bunch of research on this because I thought, what else could be misdiagnosed? It's very fascinating to me, but I think a lot of the things that, because even though I talk fast, I'm not, I'm not by nature very hyper. I mean, I have my moments, but I certainly am easily distracted, and we've talked about this before. But I have to, but it helps. So yeah. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So, in my own family, my brother was like the poster child for ADD. I wish we would have had videos of him growing up. He was the kid that was hyperactive. He couldn't focus. There was no impulse control whatsoever. My God. And so he was diagnosed early on. This was really before medication was commonly given to kids. Then I was diagnosed with ADD it might have been my late or early to mid 30s as well. And hindsight being what it is, like you look back, and I remember I did totally fine until I hit about junior high. And that's when I really struggled with putting organization, like organizing my thoughts, organizing my environment. And everything was just too much. Yeah. And so I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, like, how much of this was situational and how much of this is just biological? And
I wonder the same thing.
Yeah. So,
and then the other thing was you mentioned the clutter thing or the organization thing. I struggled with that as well. And one of the things that I think was so, I did more research, and I came up with this idea that and I connected it, that clutter can be connected to your abuse. Of course, it's also connected to ADHD and all this other stuff. It's just interesting because this brings me right back around to the idea that, and we're totally off topic, and I'm sorry, but it brings me back to the idea that a lot of these things that we may have been diagnosed with as children or adults or whatever could really be, CPTSD, which is not, I don't know if that's even a thing. Anyway, but I don't know very many people. I know a few people who have been officially diagnosed with CPTSD, clients and things like that. Not by me, by doctors. but I don't think it's a very common diagnosis, even though I would say that probably anyone who's gone through any sort of long-term narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse might have a touch of it. What do you think about that idea?
I think anytime any person experiences abuse or neglect of any kind, it's really fragmenting, and there's going to be effects from that. And I would almost be worried about a person if there wasn't, because it's such a harsh thing to go through. So yeah, I think there's a lot of these different diagnoses that get put on down the road. PTSD is the only thing that kind of captures what's going on, or CPTSD. I'd have to go double check, but I don't think CPTSD is in the DSM. I think it's only PTSD at this time. So if they're getting diagnosed with CPTSD, it's going to be from a provider who is really familiar with trauma and that concept. But like I said, I don't think they're pulling it from the DSM. But there's
a couple of people that I worked with have worked with trauma-informed therapists, and then they just kind of needed some polish, and that's why they came to polish about moving forward. So, yeah, and again, I didn't think it was in the DSM either. That's why I said I don't think it's a thing. But I mean, it is a thing, but I didn't know if it was an official thing.
It's not an official thing, but they might have just explained it because CPTSD is different from PTSD, and PTSD tends to be like an event. You're at war, a bomb goes off, you lose your best friend, right? Whereas CPTSD tends to be, there's a series of smaller events that lead up, and a person's not even aware of their trauma, or that they're having flashbacks, or it's just so much more all consuming than the more like isolated event related PTSD stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder. Those are the two, probably even bipolar, I would imagine is in that mix. Those would be, I'd say, the main ones that people tend to get diagnosed with. And then the challenge is, and this breaks my heart, is those kind of labels come with such weight. And telling an abuse survivor, yes, I actually think that you're or schizoaffective, or that you have that you're basically schizoaffective, like you're having these kind of psychotic symptoms, but then you're also have a mood disorder. So you run kind of hot and cold. So telling a person these kinds of things, it can just be absolutely devastating. And the unintended consequences is it can push a person to suicide.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of, especially for survivors, of talking about these kinds of different diagnoses in terms of behaviors, because that's really what it is. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's just clusters of different problematic behaviors. If you're open and you have that self-awareness of, my goodness, this is a problem, this is something I want to work on, then by all means, it can be worked on, because you have that level of insight and introspection. The problem with narcissists and a lot of other, sociopaths and psychopaths is they lack that introspection, and they have no sincere desire to change. So if any of these kind of behaviors describe you, if you can get with a good life coach, a good therapist, somebody who really understands this and kind of can help pull you out of that fog and repattern a lot of this behavior, at a minimum, it's manageable. But at a maximum, you can really radically change your life for the better, because there's so much that you're aware of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I needed to work on this, or I didn't realize this was connected to my childhood, or there's so many positive things that can come from this after making those connections. So
that's really true. Yeah. And I think on that same, I just agree with everything you said. I'm totally on the same page. Going through what most of us have gone through is not ever, I would not recommend it to anyone ever, and I would not wish it on my worst enemy. But I will tell you that Dana's right. You can evolve, and I personally, and I've seen it in so many other survivors, you can and do, if you choose to, evolve in a way that most people don't, or you learn to understand people on a new level, and yourself. That's the best part of it, I think. the silver lining, as it were. Yeah, totally. Now here, Randy Text says, or maybe it's just Randy text, but Randy says, I've started controlling my response to the narcissist with being very calm and not giving him the response he wants. But I feel like he just starts to scream worse to get the response he wants. And I think that's a common thing that they do, but hold out, because eventually they'll give up and get bored. That's the whole idea of Gray Rock. Do you have additional tips for her?
Is she living with this person?
I assume so. She doesn't say in the question, but I've experienced it. I guess I would say if you're not being physically abused, then try to continue, and they would usually they'll give up. They'll get bored, and it's not that you ignore them. It's that you give, like you said, calm, controlled responses, and you don't. At the same time, I think you don't necessarily want to agree with them or whatever, but in some cases, I mean, I can't lie to you. I've done the passive aggressive thing. Like if they say you're so ugly, I'll be like, you're totally right. I'm totally ugly, and just whatever, because they're like, what? They don't even know what to do about that. So I would say that, if typically you scream back to him, then, continue to stay calm and just respond as emotionlessly as possible. It's tough, but if you stick with it, most narcissists will get bored and try something different to get your attention.
Yeah. If they're trying to actively provoke you, like what Angie was saying, I call this emotional Tai Chi. It's like when somebody's coming at you, you're just moving out of the way. You're just going with the flow. And it's a great way to just kind of diffuse the situation. So like the example you gave, Angie, was so great because so often people are taught, okay, you've got to be assertive. You've got to tell them, I'm not going to put up with being talked to like this, that, and the other. When you're dealing with an irrational, illogical person, and everybody's situation is different, sometimes being that assertive just spits fuel on the fire. And sometimes it can even get a person hurt or killed. Mm-hmm. So doing what you do, like, if they're like, oh, you're, stupid, whatever they're saying, you can just be like, oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. But internally, you're not absorbing that. You realize that this is just a technique that you're using to diffuse a situation and just get them off your back. So don't emotionally own whatever it is that they're saying, but the whole point is to not engage emotionally in this argument. So it might be if they're getting in your face and really trying to provoke you, you could just say like, yeah, I get it. You're really upset. This is really frustrating. Mm-hmm. Or, yeah, you think I'm stupid. Well, then let's talk about it. Or, well, then maybe you're right. Or how about you humor me then and explain like, X, Y, and Z, or do you know what I mean? Like you're just not coming at fire with fire.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's about, and I think that's spot on. And it's about changing what they expect, but not giving them your emotion. You have to fake it at first, I think. Would you agree? Like for me, I had to fake it and pretend like it didn't bother me. And that's okay, because you will get to the point where it doesn't bother you, but it's irrelevant as long as you don't show them that it bothers you. That's what they want. Like Crystal said, or somebody said. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. And every situation's different. Like the ending of my second relationship with a sociopath, he was just Prince Charming the whole time, but he was living this whole double life, and it was just chaos and craziness. And when I had said like, oh, I'm done. Then he came back. That's when the mask totally came off, and he became very like verbally abusive and insulting. And he said a lot of things that really, really hurt. And thankfully we were on the phone, and I knew that he was saying these things in order to hurt me because I won. And they can't have the last word. And so all I had said with that was, you know what, you just really are not the person that I thought you were.
Right.
And I laughed.
Take it?
Well, some of the insults, I just laughed and I was like, okay, buddy, whatever, And then at the end I was like, you know what, really, you're not the person I thought you were. And, goodbye. At that point, then that was it. That was totally it. because I think he realized, like, I see you for what you are and I don't care. Like, you don't have the power to ruin my day or to negatively impact my self-esteem. You're chaos in human form, in malicious chaos in human form. And you're not welcome in my space. So goodbye, you know?
Yeah.
With the first sociopath, this was before, before I knew any of this stuff. He had sent me an email and I was so shocked at his callousness. And so I had fired back an email, but I was very direct about it and basically was like, he was saying that I needed to respect him after like all of this craziness. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You should get down on your knees and thank God every single day that I don't treat you like how you treated me.
Right.
And so but thankfully we were several hours away from each other and he couldn't have come by and all of this stuff. But yeah, it's hard. This stuff knocks you off balance when somebody hurts you so much and then acts like they're the victim. And it's just wild. So yeah. Keeping your cool.
It does. I'm going to pivot again. I'm sorry. It's a couple things. We were talking before about being misdiagnosed as kids, and Bible News Radio, who's actually named Stacy, she did an interview with me. The first two pieces of it are up on my channel, but she told her story, and she went through horrible abuse as a child, and they misdiagnosed her as a child, which I found to be very interesting. That she said that, and I lost the comment, so I can't read any more of it to you. But she also said, on a separate note, that CBT will help with OCD. I don't know about that, but that's an interesting thought. But the reason I'm pivoting right now is because Angela Falsetta is also apparently a retired psych nurse. Like you used to be a psych nurse, right?
Yeah.
And she says, I can tell you the patients with psychotic breakdown and suicidal, homicidal attempts, severe depression due to narc abuse fall through and they're misdiagnosed and obviously and then treated. So did you see that when you were doing that as well? Did you see people that had been abused being misdiagnosed, or I don't know if you were?
Yes. Yeah. Time and time again. I get goosebumps thinking about it because it just absolutely enrages me. And Angela had mentioned further in the chat that all of these different diagnoses, like borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, bipolar, schizoaffective, these things were often what the abuser was diagnosed as. And I would add to the mix intermittent explosive disorder. I've seen that one often. Where I worked, we had, quite a lot of antisocial personality disorder, but I have never once in all of my years come across anybody that was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder or histrionic person. Well, no, I think there was one person that I've seen that's histrionic personality disorder. And borderline personality disorder tends to be the default diagnosis for women. And I think there's a lot of like unexamined biases that kind of tie into that. But yes, so there's a lot of abuse just is not understood to the level that it needs to be. And I can't even begin to tell you how many team meetings we had two team meetings a week for like 2 hours each. So 4 hours a week, we would get in there and discuss everybody. And it was so incredibly enraging to hear different people that were like, oh, well, you know what, this guy that this was one gal's with, well, he's no longer physically abusive. Yeah. Seeming like, well, then I guess the abuse is over. Do you know what I mean? Or I guess she's fine now. And it was just this, I had to really ground myself every single time before I went into one of those meetings, because that stuff would bring me like 0 to 10 really quick. And it's just so infuriating because it's, you feel like you're screaming into the wind, and nobody gets it. And it's, it's frustrating.
It must have been an emotionally exhausting job, I would imagine. I could be wrong, but.
And it was more of like, just, everybody kind of treating you like you're the crazy one, and when you're on the receiving, and that's the thing, like when we've talked about this with that one guy who was saying that he could cure or really work with narcissists, Here's the other thing with that. I wanted to mention this too. My concern with that is, my guess is that more likely than not, he's got a lot of people that have fleas,
Yeah.
that are more of like the wounded empath or the wounded codependent that are showing up at his doorstep wanting help. They're not narcissists.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Yeah.
I mean, the kind of narcissist, by definition, if it's the personality is that extreme, they don't have the ability to introspect. So,
well, and when I did the research, I think his name's David Hawkins. I did a lot of research. I looked into him, and one of the things that I heard from his patients' wives who contacted me, which is why I looked into them, his practice or whatever is, and I know I've told you this before, but maybe somebody hasn't heard it here, but that they would typically change, but only behaviors would change, not intention, and then the behaviors would come back like periodically, and if they stopped going to this doctor, then and obviously this is probably people who maybe were actually dealing with narcissists, they would stop. If they would stop going, the behaviors would return permanently. So like, they had to go to therapy with this person forever, apparently. And, I think I mentioned Richard Grannon said, when I told him about that, he said, well, that's convenient, isn't it? Because billing by the hour, and he's right, but yeah, that's interesting. Here's another interesting, based on, these are probably people with fleas, and Hot Mess Mom says, does anyone have a ballpark guesstimate of what percentage of true NPD patients aren't diagnosed or documented because of their ability to manipulate the therapist, doctor, or deny it, so the opportunity for diagnosis never occurs? I mean, I would bet like 99.999%, I mean, right? Because actually, Bree, what is Bree's name? Yes. She and I were talking at one point, and she said, she actually wrote an article about this as well. She talked about, the math of how many narcissists are probably really out there, and it's some insane number. And I don't think she's off base. I should have been prepared to talk about that, but I just thought of it. But I actually looked into this, and she wrote this, I mean, scientifically sound article, I think, up to a point. Obviously it's a lot of guesstimation, but she kind of knows what she's talking about on this, and it was some insane number that, anyway, I think 99.99. How about you, Dana?
I would say the vast majority of narcissists don't get diagnosed because they're not going to go to therapy. Right. And if they go to therapy, just like any one of us, right, we're going to generally, well, I shouldn't say that. Most people that are going to therapy are very honest. Like, here's why I'm here. This is what's going on. I really need help. Narcissists, and same with antisocial, when they go to therapy, they're on their best behavior. And so they can fake insight really well.
Yes.
And they can tell you everything that they think that you would want to hear. And they do. And so it can be really difficult to tell, like, if what you're dealing with. And I would imagine that if a mental health clinician is in private practice, where you have no witness to your experience, it's you and the client, that it's going to take quite a while to start seeing those cracks in the mask appear. I mean, it was hard enough for us, but we had a whole treatment team. There was, 5 or 6 people for each client that worked every facet of their life. So, and we had, like jail records, and, we had this whole file on these people, and we worked with them for years. So even that, like seeing their behavior for what it was, it's still difficult because, also you're a normal, decent person, right? And so trying to even understand that a person could go to these levels, that they would possibly even pay for a psychiatric evaluation, that they would bring themselves in, that they would sit there and cry, that they would tell you all of these things, that all of that could be a lie.
It always shocks me. Always. Yeah. Even with coaching. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients have worried that I didn't believe them about something that was happening in their life. And they're, I know this sounds unbelievable. I know. And I would always say to them, why would you lie to me? You're paying me. That's silly. You know what I mean? But you're right. It totally makes wow. That's that's profound. This is kind of related, I guess. Mo Cowboy says, researching, I found Patrick Carnes. I don't know if and he says to describe a term complementary in reference to using drugs or other stimuli to enhance the payoff of NPD. What do you think about that? So he says that this guy says he uses the term complementary in reference to using drugs or other stimuli to enhance the payoff. What is the payoff of NPD? I guess it's control. I guess it's self-centered.
I mean, yeah, like I guess if a person, if it's the thrill of getting away with something, I mean,
yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Drugs and alcohol tend to kind of enhance whatever that person's feeling at that time. So if it's just the thrill of cheating, the thrill of stealing, the thrill of whatever it might be, I could totally see that. There is a strong correlation between substance abuse of any kind and really more like antisocial personality disorder. But I think you can safely lump narcissistic personality disorder in that because all antisocials are narcissists at the core. But yeah, and I think one of the reasons this stuff isn't so even if you could get a whole van full of narcissists into therapy, it's really difficult for anybody to see because the way that this kind of stuff is listed out in the DSM is you have to just experience it. They're talking, grandiosity, kind of, lack of regard, lack of empathy, manipulative, these kinds of things. That's very nebulous. And unless you're on the receiving end, I think a lot of people, when they think of a narcissist, they truly are looking for somebody that's showing up dressed like a pimp.
Yeah.
They're in this like purple velvet suit and a hat with a big ostrich feather sticking out of it. Like, that's not how that grandiosity normally presents.
Right.
Right. It tends to be that really kind of haughty attitude. And it tends to be this jaw dropping level of like arrogance and callousness and indifference to the way that they hurt other people. So, if you're not on the receiving end of it, it's really difficult to spot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you know what? That's so, when you are on I can't tell you how many times that I have said to a certain narcissist in my life that I thankfully no longer deal with, like, who taught you it was okay to act like that? Like, who taught you that? Yeah. Who told you could treat people that way? And they would just look at me like, what? I can't, that's insane. Okay. I just found the other half of the comment from Mo Cowboy. He says the payoff being control, power, pleasure, or a sense of being part of the herd, fear of abandonment, being alone. I mean, that's powerful. Yeah. And that's pretty much what you just pretty much said. But yeah. That's fascinating. That's something I want to look into a little deeper and maybe talk about more.
Yes. And there was a quote and I totally lost it. So I apologize. It was it's so well said. They had heard the difference between PTSD and CPTSD described as PTSD is like a soldier at war and CPTSD is a prisoner of war.
Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
I just got goosebumps.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
It's really spot good. On. Yes.
Yeah, really good. Now, that's very fascinating. Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Randy says, my narc he was told he had been odd as a kid and his mom didn't believe it and thought he had ADD. So she said they didn't do anything. So basically, I think she means ODD. That makes more sense. He was told he had ODD as a kid and his mom didn't believe it and thought it was ADD. So they did nothing. That's interesting. So do you think, I mean, I looked into ODD because one of my kids, my oldest, was almost like they considered it as a diagnosis for him when he was little. He didn't have it, but do you think that ODD could be connected to narcissism on some level?
Yeah, I think that tends to be a pretty big marker for basically within children. If that oppositional defiant disorder, these are the kids that, and I could see how it would be confused for ADD. They're off the chain and there's a lot of just disorder, conduct issues. The teachers are calling you, the principals are calling you, they're acting out, they're just kind of running amok and they're very much in the moment. Sometimes kids can kind of age out of that as their brains mature, especially if they have a good therapist and they're working, or a good life coach, they're working with kind of behavior modification. for stuff like that. Sometimes it's the environment. Sometimes the kids being abused at home and they're just reacting to that. Sometimes they hate the school.
Right.
And, so it's kind of hard to sort out everything. But yeah, especially with antisocial personality disorder, it's those kinds of diagnoses tend to be prevalent. But here's the other thing real quick. This is what bothers me. There's so many things that bother me. But with antisocial personality disorder, one of the criteria is that a person has to have documented conduct disorders before the age of 15. Well, where on God's green earth are you going to get that information from?
Yeah, that's
they're not an accurate historian. So you can't necessarily ask them. And what are you going to do? Call their mom?
Right.
And
she's not going to obviously tell them anyway. Because
yes. And so like how many parents are going to minimize this kind of stuff and just be like, oh, well, it was boys will be boys, or, oh, she was having a hard time or whatever. So like that bothers me as having that as a criteria. I guess in a nutshell, how just my personal opinion on this kind of stuff, I think the biggest factors that everybody really needs to be on the lookout for, it's that kind of stuff is helpful, but like the lack of empathy, the lack of remorse, the callousness, the cruel level of indifference, this kind of behavior. Like George Simon wrote a book called Character Disturbance. And he's so spot on. He's like, really, there's personality, there's like disordered personalities, right? There's behaviors, there's quirks that people have that makes it difficult for them to really fully integrate into society. That's one thing. But if you're talking about a character disturbance, pathological lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, exploiting, truly hurting other people, like maliciousness, sadistic maliciousness, this kind of stuff, this is a character disturbance. And this is far surpasses just a disordered personality. And I just can't hammer home that distinction enough. It's so important that we see this and to realize, and one of the challenges is, people always ask like, well, how do you know if this person's changed? And the reality is you really don't. And I'm a big fan of this kind of stuff. They just get better at hiding it. They really don't change. And this is why I'm also a big fan of people really distancing themselves emotionally, physically, and financially, because you don't know. And because they can do a great job at acting the part. And then 15 years later, whatever, it surfaces, oh, you have $300,000 in chargebacks, or, they've been hiding all this kind of stuff. And then it really bites you. So I'm a big fan of, if somebody shows you that they have some sort of character disturbance, see that for what it is and distance yourself, because that's way problematic.
Right. And there, on that same note, I think it's clear there's a spectrum, so you will have people that will just kind of be a little arrogant, or people who but that's not really ever the type of narcissism we're talking. It's more than just being a little stuck on yourself. In fact, I encourage being a little stuck on yourself in a good way. You know what I mean? I want you to feel good about yourself. But yeah, Dana's right that you don't give them the chance if you can avoid it. If somebody is on that dangerous spot. On a similar note, or related note, Shannon Slays wants to know, how likely is it for a narcissist to go through with the threat of self-harm to get you back? I mean, I have had 3 clients over the years who have had a narcissist actually do the thing off themselves. And I'm saying it that way because YouTube, but that's happened. But outside of that, I haven't seen it a whole bunch. But to be fair, I mean, how many, that's a pretty large percentage if you think about it. 3 different people. I mean, I've probably worked with hundreds of clients, but for 3 of them, I mean, not large in the grand scheme of things, but large in the more than I would expect. However, with that being said, I would say that the largest majority of them are only talking about it. They're not really going to do it, but that's not your problem. So what you have to do, what I recommend is that you go and you call the police or whoever your local people are, your authorities, and you tell them you're going to do this. I'm not qualified to help you, in this situation. So I'm going to call the authorities and they'll help you. Good luck. However you want to say it. That's a little harsh sounding, but this is just an attempt to suck you in and keep you living in fear and guilt and pain. You don't deserve that, Shannon. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. More often than not, it's a manipulation to get you to, feel guilty, pity, sympathy, to reopen contact, these kinds of things. All any of us can do if somebody is suicidal, even if they're your best friend, is to call 911. Like, we are not equipped to diffuse that situation. If they are in a place where they really need help, they need to go immediately to the hospital and be assessed. And that is the only thing that any one of us can do, is to get them the help that they need. The added benefit is that if a person is using that to manipulate, they learn really quick that does not work. So, and I think regardless, a big part of this, like Angie was saying, is kind of knowing what we have control over, knowing what we don't have control over, and also knowing what we are appropriately responsible for and what we're not responsible for. And if somebody is trying to hold you emotionally hostage and they're like, oh, I'm going to kill myself, and they actually do it, then that's a decision that they made.
Yeah.
And we don't have control. I mean, you can't keep another person in line of sight 24 hours. You can't do all this stuff. It's not fair, and it's not reasonable. And that's how these murder suicides tend to happen. So it's not safe for anybody to even try to do that. So if somebody does hurt themselves, just realizing you did what you could do, but that's on them. That's a choice that they made, and that you're not going to own any of that guilt for that.
That's right. It's not, that's right.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think it's common, but I was surprised that it was more, and to be fair, in those cases that I discussed, those people did not, this might be helpful. Those people didn't do what they did because they were being left. They did it for other reasons, which I also think were manipulation. One of them probably a criminal reason, because he was trying to hide from his crimes. So I should have clarified that. I think that's big and important. But yeah. Okay, I want to just pick up this comment from Mo Cowboy really quick. He says, Karn's the guy that he was talking about, and this is great information. I want to say thank you in advance, because I'm totally going to read on this. I'm a huge nerd and I love this stuff. Karn's is studying 200, this is Mo Cowboy, I already said that, 240 different behaviors, and which one will be exhibited or present with another behavior, like orbitals, one present and the other behaviors will be present. That is awesome, and I can't wait to look into that. Thank you for sharing it with us, Mo Cowboy. Yeah, any thoughts on that before we?
Yeah, I'll check it out. The only thing I would caution people against with this kind of stuff is these studies and these surveys can be really interesting. They totally are, but
you have to take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah, you really do. And you really can't, because this is my concern. I see people that take these studies and they use it to try to better understand their own situation. Makes total sense, right? But if they're taking some sort of survey, like there's domestic violence surveys that kind of assess ranges of danger. And if they're like, well, but this person hasn't hit me yet, they haven't done this, they haven't really threatened, that somehow means that I'm safe.
Right.
And it doesn't. So, if a person has shown that they're dangerous to you in any way, shape, or form, like, it's going to be up to you to figure out how to distance yourself from them.
Yeah.
But I guess so. Yeah. Don't interpret this kind of stuff that it might mean that you're safe, or just because it doesn't line up for the study, that it doesn't, that it means that you're not dealing with an abuser, or that you're not, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is, really important, especially for people who watch my channel, because I love the research. I'm a huge nerd about it. And so every time new research comes out, I'm talking about it. But I want you to hear exactly what, and in fact, I may make a whole video out of that, what Dana just said, because she's right. You can't, first of all, it doesn't even matter what the research says, because toxic, I mean, it matters, but toxic is toxic is toxic. Abuse is abuse. But I don't want you to ever take a video that I've made about a research study and assume that something is safe that isn't safe, or whatever. I think that's really important. Thank you, Dana, for bringing that up. I think that's important.
Yeah. And just to kind of clarify too, like, a lot of people, again, they'll start finding different facts, or they'll come across different. This happened with a lot of my different videos. People were like, okay, well, they have this and they have this and they have this, therefore that means that they're a narcissist.
Right.
And that's not the case. It's like, it's sort of like, it's the equivalent of like saying all cats are mammals, but not all mammals are cats.
Yeah.
So this kind of behavior, a lot of narcissists have this behavior, but not everybody that has this behavior is necessarily a narcissist.
Absolutely true. Yeah. But on that same note, I want to say this. Sometimes, like, and the reason okay, so I did videos a while back about player versus narcissist, a long time ago, like 2 years ago.
About what versus a narcissist?
Player versus narcissist. Like where I live.
Oh, player,
like player, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay.
You know, okay. So where I live, and I did at least one of those videos with a couple friends of mine. It was pretty funny. But anyway, player versus narcissist. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because this is an example. You see a lot of times people will be like, well, you know, okay, yeah, he said that it wasn't going to mean anything, but I was just really into him and I thought that I would be able to make him love me. Or she said this and I thought she could love me, even though she said I wasn't ready for, you know, basically indicating that a player is someone who's not going to say to you, yes, I love you, let's get together and let's be together. The player is going to be like, you know what, we can totally do this, but just so you know, I'm not into it. This is just a one-time thing, or this is just sex or whatever. And a narcissist is, you know, sometimes, not all narcissists, do the love bombing thing. You're the perfect person for me, da, da, da. But I think what people don't recognize is that the narcissist in those moments, at least those on the maybe lower end of the spectrum, not those up toward the sociopathic end, because they know exactly what they're doing. But I think sometimes a narcissist on the lower end of the spectrum, on the less sociopathic end, middle spectrum, I'm just going to stop at the spectrum. Anyway, would believe, and this is why I think it's so easy for us to, you know, especially, you know, I consider myself an empath, I read people really well. And I kept trying to figure out, why didn't I know? Why couldn't I tell that was BS this person was saying to me? Well, it's because in the moment they say it, they believe it. Some of those on the lower end of the spectrum, you know what I mean? So I think that's a big important thing. I don't know why this is important, but I brought it up because you were talking about you know, we can't diagnose anyone. The misdiagnosing our people or whatever. So sorry, I got a little.
No, yeah, you're fine. You're fine. And I think too, another important point in all that is like these different behavior traits. This is something that I think are both pretty passionate about. I know I hammer this point home almost every single live stream on my channel, but it's about understanding problematic behavior, and it's about understanding when you're being treated in a way that's not okay with you.
That's right.
It doesn't matter if they're a narcissist, a sociopath, bipolar, a jerk, a player, you know, a peanut butter sandwich. Like, it doesn't matter what you call them. It doesn't matter if somebody is treating you in a way that's not okay with you. That's at the core of this.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Now, a couple. Just me. Wait a minute. I don't know. I lost it. But the Soul Whisperer mentions there are two different types of narcissists, overt and covert, and this is true. Covert being the more sneaky types, so that overt being the more out there kinds. And I think that's true. And I think because Stevil said, Stevil, that's cool, like that name, said that, well, I don't understand why narcissists didn't show any of these things. Again, we don't know if that person's a narcissist unless they've been diagnosed. But this point Soul Whisperer made is valid, because I think a lot of times covert, and this is kind of on a similar note, I guess, but I think a lot of times when we have a more covert type person, they kind of seem to be very sensitive and very, you know, conscientious and very whatever. And sometimes, and then you end up that it's sneakier than your standard out there narcissist. I mean, they all are sneaky, but with the covert type, we miss it sometimes because they do seem like, I used to be really into that dark, disturbed artist type when I was younger. Girl. And, you know, and I think that probably more than one of those might have had some covert tendencies over the years. So, but I would always think I can help them, I can fix them, I can, you know, I understand them and other people don't understand them. I'm so dark and deep too. back in the day. Anyway, took me a while to realize it was okay to be happy. Anyway, so but yeah, I think that was a valid point. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see again, kind of like back to looking at individual traits and trying to figure out, okay, does 1 + 1 = 2? This is where it can get challenging, because with overt narcissists, they're more textbook.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are arrogant and grandiose, and kind of they suck the energy out of a room, and they're just difficult and demanding, and kind of like, quote unquote, like that guy, or like that girl at the party. It's just exhausting. Yeah. Covert is a totally different level. Like, they can come across as really sympathetic and charming, and they can seem to have a ton of insight. They might be super spiritual. They might be religious. They might be way big into self-help. And they might seem like they have this ability to introspect and reflect. And then you find out, oh my gosh, no, they don't. And, they're like,
and I think Hyde things.
Yeah, it tends to be kind of Jekyll and Hyde. And a lot of that behavior tends to be kind of closer to that sociopathic side of the spectrum, because it's exploitative. Yes. These are the people that tend to live double lives. They have this long-standing pattern of like pathological lying, pathological cheating, like stealing money. I had a good friend. She was married to this guy for close to 20 years. And if you were to have met him, anybody would have thought he's amazing. They had foster children. He was so good with this one little girl in particular. He was the youth minister at their church. He went to his kids' soccer games every weekend. Like, he was very involved. He was very friendly. He was wonderful. But talk about double life. And, lying, cheating, stealing money from his company. He's now facing jail time. Like, it's wild, the difference between them. But he really put on this good front.
Yeah,
they can do that. So don't just think, oh, because, well, they cried, this means that they're not a narcissist, or they apologized, this means that they're not a narcissist, or they didn't cheat, so that means that they're not a narcissist. Like, again, it can be helpful to get rid of the label and to focus on what about their behavior is problematic. Like, if they're a pathological liar, if they're, doing whatever it is, they're manipulative, they're abusive, whatever it is, like, that's the important thing to focus on.
For sure.
A problem is a problem. Abuse is abuse. Somebody was saying in the chat, toxic is toxic. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Gigi. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing else you can even, that's it. Okay. Here's something. Okay. Steven says, or Stevel, we were kind of talking about it, says, yeah, I know about overt and covert, but mine did nothing as per videos. It confuses me to if they were actually a narcissist. And I think you just answered that question. So I think that's okay.
Really, let me just kind of hammer this home. Yeah. At the end of the day, if somebody, whoever it is, if they're treating you in a way that you're not okay with, and if you have the skill set to be assertive and to address the issue head on in a tactful, mature, appropriate way, and they're unable to work towards a solution, or if they get better if more communication creates more confusion and chaos, there's a problem. If you're trying to come up with working towards a solution and they might act like they are, but then later they're sabotaging you, they're doing all this stuff behind your back, that's a problem. And so it's just so important that we understand when we're being treated in a way that's not okay, and knowing how to be able to address that, and then figuring out, okay, well, where do your boundaries and standards and deal breakers come into play? Because at what point are you going to be like, you know what, enough is enough, I'm cutting bait.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
They don't need to cheat. They don't need to do anything. Sometimes, if they're at the point where talking to them is like talking to a brick wall and nothing gets resolved because they just don't care, then that's a problem. That's as big of a problem as anything else. So, yeah.
Chantel, I just want to say, Chantel, I think I missed part of her comments, but she says that she has a therapist and children's aid, I guess, offered to pay 5 sessions, but the caseworker went into the office with her daughter and had a talk with the therapist first. She felt like therapy was pointless. I didn't see your whole comment, but I just want to say to you really quickly, I'm so sorry. And I wish I could give you better information than that, but the chat won't let me scroll back at the moment. I'm sorry to interrupt our flow there, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch base on that. And then I have like two more comments that I want to say based on what I'm seeing in the chat here. There's so many other things, but I know we're running, like we're way behind on time. We're way over, and I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. But do you want to pick out like a comment or two that you can grab, and then we can?
Sure.
Okay. Angela Falsetta said, and this one's kind of for you, Dana. She says all the time, pretty much, they're diagnosed and thereby wrongly treated while in the hospital after the and the aftercare treatment is all wrong for this patient as well discharged to their abuser. And I think that's unfortunately probably true. For those of you who are just joining us, Angela Falsetta and Dana have both been psych nurses. So they were kind of back and forth on that. Okay.
And real quick, just to add to that, it was so common. This was like the one thing that kept coming up. In my situation, it was this, a lot of case managers and generally like therapists and people that were trying to help, they would be like, okay, well, this person, there seemed to be a lot of confusion about the difference between mental illness and personality disordered stuff. And so they're like, well, this person needs their medication or they need this, that, or the other. And it's like, and the head therapist who really had a good understanding of this stuff, almost every single team meeting, she's like, you guys, it's personality disorder. It's antisocial. Like medication's not going to stop it. This is not mental illness we're dealing with. Like this is their behavior. This is personality stuff. And yeah, so it gets confused and blurred all the time by lots of people.
And it certainly can't be easy. And on the flip side of that, it can't be, like we've talked about a million times, which is part of the reason that a lot of you guys are here. If you haven't experienced it, it's really hard to see it. So, yeah. Because it is so subtle, Now, okay, I have a question from Anonymous Healer that I want to answer. She says, or he says, my ex at first pretended to be very sexually interested in me. Once he moved in, he got less and less interested. Then it dried up entirely. He began stonewalling me when I asked about it. This is common. I want you to know, male or female, it's common. Sometimes you have people who get, they hook you in that way, the love bombing stuff, right? And then sometimes you have people who do it for different reasons. But inevitably, when you're dealing with someone who's abusive to you and they know that to be connected with you in that way makes you feel secure, makes you feel validated or whatever, yeah, they're going to take it away. They'll use it as punishment or, by not sharing it with you. I'm trying to be careful because of YouTube. But yeah, I think that's more common than you might expect, Anonymous Healer. Dana, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you're dealing with a person who's got some really profound dysfunction going on, and they don't go about getting their needs met in a healthy, well-adjusted, sincere, solutions-oriented way. It's all about them all the time. And they are not comfortable with reality. And so this is where that manipulation comes in. This is where all of these bizarre behaviors come in. This kind of stuff, to a fairly normal person, it doesn't make sense. But I think if you can see it from that lens of, they just kind of throw out whatever kind of immature communication or reactions that they have. Like, it's weird because normal people are like, I don't get it. Like, why is it so difficult to just say, I have an issue with X, Y, or Z, or I want to go sleep with a bunch of people and I want to be single. Like, why is it so hard? Why can't you just be on the level? And it's just, that's not them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, Tina Law just added something, and I'm sorry for bringing up another comment, but she said, thanks for saying I don't have to diagnose my husband. She said, the fact that I feel abused and lied to and cheated on is enough of a reason to leave. You guys are awesome. And that's spot on. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean,
yeah, 100%. If intimacy is not present, in a relationship, that relationship will not work. And the only way that intimacy, true intimacy, can be present if both people are, have open, honest, sincere, and solutions-oriented communication. If you've got one person who's manipulating and finessing and, just kind of undermining and running around behind the scenes and doing all kinds of like intimacy busting behavior, then there's no relationship there. Yeah. So that can kind of help to look at it that way. Like there needs to be this emotional safety where you can open up and you can let them into your world, and that you can trust them with whatever you're saying, and it's mutual, and then they can do the same. Like that's how intimacy is. It's not just sex.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah. An anonymous healer added, yeah, he cheated with several people over 1 or 2 years, and then she kicked him out when she found out. Good for you. Deal breaker. Important. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry again.
Go for it.
I'm sorry. Chantel says, she was the one that was mentioning that her daughter or her child was in a therapy session, and the caseworker went in and talked to the therapist first. She says CAS, which I assume is Child Something Services, where she lives, refuses to listen to anything I suggest is wrong with my daughter and family. After 8 years of going nowhere, I asked the worker to look up Dr. Childress, and the CAS worker laughed at me. Yeah, this is really unfortunate, because something that I see, that I've seen with situations like this, is that if you go and you try to diagnose anybody, they're almost always going to turn the other way, and they're not going to look at anything. And so you have to be really careful as to what you say might be wrong. Instead of saying, I think this person's a narcissist, you can say, well, this person is, manipulative, and they do this undercutting thing. You describe what's happening, as opposed to saying, I think it's a narcissist. Because most, and Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, most care providers, whether they're psychology, psychiatry, medical, if you go in there and you look like, I Googled it and this is what I think, they are not into it. They're like, no, you don't know, and so I try to be really careful with describing things to doctors in such a way that I do it. I explain to them the symptoms, and I let them make their own diagnosis, and maybe that would be helpful in the future. I don't know. Thoughts, Dana?
Yep, absolutely. I think especially if you're talking about behavior-wise, really listing out, these are all of the problematic behaviors that I'm experiencing. And it can be really challenging, because a lot of it, the help that you're going to get, it depends on that person's level of familiarity with emotional and psychological abuse. I would say the vast majority of people out there, they're not trained in this. And if they've never been on the receiving end of it, then like learning about it in a book, even if they've read a few books on it, like reading about it and actually living it are two very different things. It's sort of like the difference between reading about how to run a marathon and actually running a marathon.
Right.
So it's difficult, and I'm sorry that you're going through this. It's incredibly frustrating, and
it's rough.
So I had a question. I'm going to have to repost it in the chat. Okay. Shastina was making the comment that she's over Narcula, but her health is not getting any better. It's a harder fight to get healthy again than breaking the trauma bond. What do you think about that, Angie?
I kind of get it. I know that it requires intention. I don't know with Shastina exactly what you're dealing with. Shastina, I'm sorry. I don't know what you're dealing with, Shastina, but I know that I can't remember. I know you're part of our Spanily, and I want to say that you have a chronic pain thing, but I don't want to make any assumptions. But I will tell you this. Obviously go to the doctor and get checked out and make sure that whatever you need to be doing that way, you should do first. Assuming that you are on the right path in that way, I think it requires intention on your part, and you do have to figure out a way to let go of that inner turmoil, which I know that you've done a lot of that work as well. But I feel like the body sort of, and again, I want to just disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, and I recommend you always see a doctor first. But in general, I feel like the body sort of follows the mind a little bit, or the soul, or whatever you want to call it, the emotional state of you. And so I have found in my own life that if I can find ways to stay calm, to stay happy, to stay peaceful, meditation is very helpful. I literally get healthier. Like I'm hardly, and I'm going to just knock on wood right now, I'm hardly ever sick because I get sick here and there, but not very often, because I stay really focused on trying to stay as positive as I can. And like Dana talks about, being grounded and finding, ways to stay mindful of the moment and not let my head go too far away, if that makes any sense. Dana, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. Stress is really underrated as far as the damage that it can do, the long-standing damage that it can do. And I had a friend, a coworker actually, who years ago who had developed cancer, and after she got her diagnosis, she came back to the office, and again, we were nurses, and she said it was the strangest thing. They'd asked her if she had any stress or if there was anything really problematic going on in her life.
Yeah.
And that because there's such a correlation between a lot of this unhealed stuff, and it manifests physically. And any type of inflammatory disorders, more severe illness, like these kinds of things, chronic colds, fibromyalgia, pain, headaches, all kinds of things. Stress is such a huge component. So yeah, if you can take time, even if you're out of the abuse, all of that stuff is still stirred up within you, and really taking time to de-stress. And maybe that is, it's going to be a series of little things. And of course it's going to be unique to you, but possibly setting aside 30 minutes every night before you go to bed to read something that's enjoyable.
Yeah.
To listen to guided imagery videos right when you go to bed, or yoga or meditation, like any number of things, just being extra good to yourself and exercising, processing, getting that stress out of your system is so huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Shastina also added that she said her diagnosis, CPTSD, vitamin D deficiency, spinal stenosis with myelopathy, which I don't think is necessarily, but also triple. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. She adds that triple D in the entire spine and fibromyalgia. I mean, I think I can't say anything about your spine, but I definitely would say CPTSD and fibro at the very least could totally be connected, and everything Dana said is accurate.
Yeah, there's even a lot of doctors' offices and hospitals and places like that are connected to kind of the latest trend in yoga is trauma yoga, and it helps a person to get reconnected with their body. And so that might be something that you might be interested in or could benefit from.
Yeah. I just remembered something. I'm so sorry that I meant to say earlier to Shastina. I did an interview with a nutritionist like last year sometime, who actually talked about fibromyalgia and how it's connected, and how you can use certain nutritional tweaks or whatever to work on that. And I can't remember the name of the video, but if you type in my name in fibromyalgia or something in the search, you should be able to find it. So that.
And also real quick, I just want to add to that, like, just like Angie's saying, there are other components to these things. Like stress can be a huge contributing factor. It can switch genes on and off. Like it's a big deal, but it might not be the only thing that's going on. So it could be diet, it could be genetics, it could be, and. So just have that.
Absolutely. And really quick, I'm sorry, I'm so excited I didn't have a 2:00 appointment today. Really quick, Mo Cowboy added something that I just wanted to wave at him about. He said, learning is fun. I'm with you. Another rabbit hole is language skills, feral children research, tiny window for learning language in humans. Is there also a tiny window to learn empathy? And I would say the window is smaller than I would like to admit, but I don't know if it's as tiny as the language window, but that's an interesting thing I want to look up. Anyway, okay. I know we're so over. Dana, do you have any other comments you want to grab? I'm going to try not to look at the chat until
I know there's a lot of good stuff in there. I'll just add my 2 cents on that. I think, they've done different studies with babies and touch and kind of the ability, the human touch and mirroring and all of this kind of stuff. If that's not cultivated at a young age, these babies have a failure to thrive, and some of them can even die. And so these higher level order skills like empathy, if I really feel like if a person doesn't have that really by the age of 7, the odds of them truly tapping into that as an adult are going to be slim to none. They're really, and that's if a person even has a desire to, because if they already lack empathy, they're not going to care.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
I
And
mean, yeah.
oh, sorry. He added, he kind of commented again. He said, thus the reason NPD cannot change because they can't learn empathy. And I think, what do you think? I think that's, yeah.
I mean, there's another study that they did. There's a program where they took really violent criminal prisoners, and they had them partnered with abused dogs, generally pit bulls that had been,
I heard about that.
yeah. And so then the whole thing was to get them to take responsibility and ownership for another living creature. And they were saying, okay, yeah, there was empathy, and they were seeing these behavior changes in these prisoners, which is fantastic. However, I don't think I just wouldn't risk having somebody who has a long-standing track record of cruel, callous behavior. I just wouldn't even give that a second chance. Even though there might have been some studies that you can read about that, oh yeah, sure, with like neuroplasticity and these different things that a person could develop this kind of a skill, I wouldn't bank on it. And I for sure wouldn't bank that they've been able to change like throughout their whole personality.
Yeah.
It's difficult for any one of us. I mean, all we can do is, as these behaviors surface within us, I mean, I'm talking us now, like when we have these problematic behaviors surface, we address them one at a time, but a person has to have that level of insight and introspection and motivation to change in order to do that. And an awareness that there's a problem. And if a person doesn't have all that, then they're not going to change, because it's below their level of awareness. And
yeah, I want to say on that same note, I have found this is how I have changed in any positive way ever in my life, is I had to get to this point where I was like, look, this is who I am. These are all the flaws about me, and I accept that unconditionally. And I can decide, am I going to fix them or not? And that's what, where I can. Obviously, I can't fix my shortness unless I wear big shoes, but I can fix, other things I have wrong with me, and everybody can fix some things, and we have to accept and modify for the other things. I think raw self, looking, introspection, whatever, being aware of yourself and knowing, okay, you know what? I'm a little lazy sometimes, or okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm super smart, but I get really bored when I think about math or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, own your strengths, but also own your weaknesses, because it's okay. Whatever you call a weakness. I mean, some people like the fact that somebody has a big butt, and some people don't. Whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, and I had this thought the other night, like, when we're so focused on like, yes, personal growth, and I want to really kind of examine all of my behaviors and really kind of be the most like self-actualized person I can possibly be. And I had this thought of, I really wonder how, because when we start changing this stuff, it's such a big deal for us, right? Like we have these aha moments, and we're working on stuff, and we're examining all this stuff. But I really wonder, like, if I were to contact some friends that have known me for 20 years, who I've lost touch with, if they would even see any of those changes. I really feel like the core of me is the exact same as it was when I was in elementary school.
Sure.
And
but now you accept that, and you may not have always accepted that, right? Like,
yeah, well, and I think it's interesting, because then I think you can kind of extrapolate that to other people, right? Yeah. So especially abusive people. So we so often get caught up in like, but can this porcupine become a puppy?
Yeah, that's right? An excellent point.
Like, even though we might have the desire to change, and we might have changed a lot of things about ourselves, to other people, they're like, yeah, I see a few differences, but at the core, you're the same. So because other people can see us, they have that emotional distance. They can see us and our behavior better than we can.
That's right.
But yeah, right. I think you're right. Accepting it and realizing that perfection is not obtainable, and that this whole journey to self-actualization, it's truly a journey that's going to go throughout our whole life. And that's okay. That's what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. It's an ongoing thing. But I just want to reiterate one other thing. We're having a great talk today. I'm so sorry. But really quick, I just want to reiterate this one thing. And it is just that I know for me, for example, I know personally that I could lose some weight. I'm working on it. by the way, on an off note, I decided to stop keto and go back to Weight Watchers. We'll talk about that
Okay.
later.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, it's working better. It's a better thing for me personally, but it's more well-rounded. Anyway, but my point is that there are some things about myself that I could change, that I should change according to society, and I just don't change. And I choose that open-minded, like I am never gonna be like a size 0. Ever, 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 even though I'm only 5 feet tall. Never going to be that. Don't want to be that. I'll probably die if I get to that point. And that's not because I think I'm big boned or anything like that. It's because I like food. And I have a, not super fast metabolism, man. Okay. So, and I have a sit down job. And yes, I should exercise more, and I'm working on that too. But my point is, just because we know something is wrong with us, if we also have to be honest with ourselves on, am I really doing the work to change it? And if I'm not, am I going to beat myself up for that? Yeah, I'm doing the work to try to get a little healthier. I'm working on that. But look, the reason I stopped keto, I'm just going to put it out here, is because every time I was on keto 2 months, and twice in 2 months, I had things that weren't keto foods. And both of those times I stopped losing weight for an entire week afterward. When I was on Weight Watchers before, that's how I lost. I mean, that basic idea is how I lost 100 pounds back in the day. And so now I'm on Weight Watchers again, because you can eat something and still keep losing weight, and you can count it in your points and all this stuff. So for me, that's a better option, and that's why. But that's my point, is that we all have to modify our lives around the ideas that, I think, looking at yourself without any rose-colored glasses, and like just really, I spent a lot of years lying to myself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And the minute that I said, okay, I'm not perfect, and these are all the things that are wrong with me, and or at least that I can see, right? Because I am still human, of course. That was a big turning point for me. And I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly, but being able to admit to myself, not only are you not perfect, but there's a lot of stuff wrong with you, and that's okay, was a huge deal for me. And being aware enough to say to myself, okay, I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm going to have a damn piece of birthday cake if I want to, or a cookie every now and then, and I'm just talking about the weight thing specifically, but, or, okay, well, I'm going to not return this item and lose the money because I don't have time to do it. And the time is, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Am I making
you're making sense? Perfect sense.
Okay.
And it's like you're spying on me, because I do so much of that same stuff too. But yeah, I think, what you're saying, and we have to be honest with ourselves. And that's the thing, like denial, this is a defense mechanism that's going on in our subconscious. We are not aware of when we're in denial. Other people can see this, right? This is why when we go around this mountain multiple times, it frustrates other people, because they're not emotionally invested. They can see the problem, right? But the added challenge is, just like we're talking about narcissists and abusers, they have these defense mechanisms that kick in, and they start acting really erratically as a result. We have those same defense mechanisms, and they kind of lift and lower like a fog. So it's really challenging and to get comfortable enough with reality to live in it.
Yeah.
These defense mechanisms are there for a reason, and that this kind of waves, it tends to kind of comes in waves of awareness, where I kind of look at like a video game, like you just start leveling up. Like you have these, you're not, thank goodness, we're not going to have all at once. We're not going to be hit with this tsunami of, oh, here's everything you need to work on. It's kind of these different waves. And every single time it comes with aha moments, and it comes with this realization of, how did I not see this before? Within your own self. And then you address it, and then that little personal growth happens, and then kind of the next wave comes, and other things are brought to your awareness, and aha moments happen. And then, hopefully some sort of change occurs. And that's just life. It's just life. And it's what personal growth is all about. Absolutely. But for a lot of people, living in reality is really uncomfortable, and they don't want to do it. And that's where you get all kinds of ways that people try to cope with things.
Yes. Okay. I got to say it.
Yes.
That is something I've been really playing with in my head lately, because I've said that to several clients recently, because about being uncomfortable, because what is uncomfortable? Change is uncomfortable. Confrontation is uncomfortable. Doing something different than we've always done is uncomfortable. And like, I really think that in order to actually get comfortable in our lives in general, in ourselves and our skin and our bodies and our everything, we have to be willing to first become uncomfortable for a minute, you know? Oh, that's powerful. Oh,
it truly is. It truly, truly is. And I think one of the ways you were talking about earlier, one of the ways that we can do that is by unconditional acceptance.
Yes.
Of yes, there's going to be things, behaviors or situations that we've handled, and we're going to look back and be embarrassed and horrified and all kinds of things. Yeah. There's going to be ways that we've coped in the past that are going to make us really uncomfortable. But if we can approach ourselves with that unconditional acceptance and just be like, you know what, you did the best you could at that time, and I still love you, and you still matter, and you're still worthy.
Yeah.
And
huge.
You're still going to be okay. And it's okay to acknowledge these different things. And this is where I think getting a support system can be really helpful to kind of keep us accountable, but also for that added support. Yeah. Yes, you're moving out into change. Change is always scary, but that's where the growth happens.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and Shosina says, uncomfortable AF, but we'll progress into peace, hopefully. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's sort of like carving out a cancer.
Yes.
You know, like it's going to hurt. There's going to be, it's got to hurt before it gets better. And personal growth is very much that same way. Like, because if we don't do that hard work, then we're going to continue denying it. And this stuff is going to fester, and it's going to grow, and things are going to become more and more uncomfortable. And then we're going to start using more and more different defenses to become okay with a huge problem. And then there's eventually going to be this point down the road where we have that wake up call. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm 600 pounds. Oh my gosh, I'm deep in debt. Oh my gosh, like something. We're painfully aware of how we've been coping and how it hasn't been working for us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And a couple things, wait a minute. VIP Kid says it was around a year of discomfort, and I'm now coming out of it feeling empowered. And I think that's an important thing. And DJB added, it's like birthing pains, hurts now, but it's worth it. Yes, ma'am. Exactly like that. Yes. And then, oh, I thought I saw another one. Oh, Emily Starr said, how old are you? I'm 43. Thanks for asking. See, unconditional. I don't care that you think I'm old.
Yeah. I'm 41, so I'm right behind you. Yeah.
Right on. So, yeah, right on. Okay. You guys, this is an amazing conversation, and I want to stay all day, but I have to go and do my business. And I know that Dana has to do her business as well. So we're going to have to wrap. Dana, this has been really great today. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, as always. So for those of you who haven't been here since the beginning, might be a couple of you, go over to Thrive After Abuse and make sure you subscribe to Danny's channel, because we will be there next week for our Tuesday live stream together. And subscribe here. Make sure you hit the bell notification on each, and you'll be notified. Also, whenever we do these streams, if you text Angie Live, all one word, ANGIELIVE to 33222, I'll text you 5 to 15 minutes before we go live, unless we have a technical issue like we did today, then it might be a little longer, and I apologize for that. But I'll text you before we go live. Dana, any final thoughts for the day?
Oh gosh, I just think it just goes back to enjoy the journey. All of this stuff, abuse is not something I'd wish on anybody, but there truly is. We can make the conscious decision to squeeze as much as we possibly can out of this experience, because we're here. And so we might as well. And that you really can rebuild your life. And there's a lot of good that we can consciously make come out of this.
Yep. So absolutely. Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you soon. Have a lovely day. Bye, Dana. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thanks.